You about ready? About to start on time. You want to unmute Sarah?
Sarah, did you get the prompt?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I was just neglecting to click it. Great. Um, so shall we start with Jordan and with your intro for us for how for our meeting logistics,
Yeah,
and then I'll get started after that.
absolutely. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you are currently muted and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the committee co-chairs, Sarah and Sandrea, and any presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentations, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by pressing the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are calling in on the phone, it is *+9 to raise your hand and *+6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to find the React menu, the participants menu, or the button that says more, where you will find the raise hand feature in one of those. If you plan to speak during the meeting, it would help us if you would rename your device with your full first and last name. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support.
Great. Thank you, Jordan.
Mhm.
Hi, everybody. This is the CB8. Welcome to the CB8 Social Justice Committee meeting. It's September 29th, 2025. And tonight we're really excited to present our speaker and this topic. This session was my co-chair, Sandrea Coleman's idea. And we were thinking about what would be of what was a topic that people were interested in right now, and she raised mid-century, mid-decade, sorry, mid-decade redistricting. And it's not very often that a matter of national conversation that is essential to our democracy, um, where you have the expert not only right here in New York City, but right here in Community District 8, living here. And so we are so excited to have Professor Jeffrey Weiss here. He is a national expert in redistricting, voting rights, and the census law. He's served as counsel to several New York State Assembly speakers and Senate leaders, state legislative leaders, members of Congress, and other state and local government officials when they needed help on redistricting and voting rights matters across the nation. And he's currently a professor at New York Law School as the chair of the New York City Bar Association's Election Law Committee and serves as a member of the American Bar Association's Election Law Committee. And so this conversation that's happening now in New York State is not only of great importance to all of us, but we also have the speaker here who is probably um, fielding all the phone calls right now for this particular topic. So before I turn it over to Professor Weiss, Sandrea, is there anything that you'd like to jump in with?
No, just welcome everybody and let's go.
Great, great.
Thank you.
So, oh, sorry.
That was it. Thank you.
Okay. So Professor Weiss has requested that if you have a quick question, that you can raise your virtual hand and to ask that question, and we'll be on the lookout for any hands that go up. But if you have a question that requires more discussion, that we'll hold those off until the Q&A portion when we can have a more in-depth discussion uh, about the various topics or issues that his presentation might raise. So without further delay, Professor Weiss, if there's anything that I've missed, or if you'd like to share more about your background before you begin with your discussion about redistricting, I hand this time over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you. It's especially interesting to be discussing redistricting not only in 2025, but a day after the whole mayoral race seems to be heading in new directions, which will probably be decided before redistricting is. And yes, I'm very pleased to be back home in the Upper East Side. I lived on East 77th Street during the early 2000s, and now I am on East 75th Street, so I'm home. Well, I'll start off with giving you a 30,000-foot history of how redistricting took place in New York, literally from the founding of the state through 2012. The state legislature redrew the congressional, state senate, and state assembly district lines once every 10 years after the decennial census was taken. This was done through simple legislation. It was usually done without much public comment. Things modernized a bit in the 1980s when then Speaker Stanley Fink, who was one of my mentors, created a task force within the legislature that actually had non-legislator members. We also computerized in the 1980s for the first time to bring what used to be a magic marker and big charts on the wall process, into the then 20th century. So all the years that the legislature drew lines internally, it is akin to having the politicians pick their voters. And after the 2010 cycle, a movement developed in the state to call for what started in places like Arizona and California to have an independent redistricting commission. And the late Mayor Ed Koch was quite active. He pretty much dedicated his last years alive to creating an independent redistricting process. But things ended up in 2012 where then Governor Andrew Cuomo and the Republican State Senate leadership created a constitutional amendment that established a bipartisan advisory commission. They called it the Independent Redistricting Commission, but it's advisory and it's appointed by legislative leaders. And as we enact amendments to the Constitution in New York, the amendment had to be approved by the legislatures in 2012, again in 2013, after a new legislature was elected. And then the voters approved this constitutional amendment in 2014. And it did several things. First, it set up an advisory commission of 10 people, 2 appointed by each of the 4 legislative leaders, the Speaker, the Senate Majority Leader, and the 2 minority leaders. And then those 8 individuals picked 2 independent members who were neither Republicans or Democrats. But as things turned out, the commission ended up having 10 members with 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, although the independents, one each, sided with the major political parties. And there were a number of different kinds of requirements on how the commission could operate, whether the state legislature was controlled by one party or by 2 parties. And up until 2018, except for one period in 2008 and 9, the state legislature was always under divided control. Republicans controlled the Senate, Democrats controlled the Assembly. And the votes in the commission, the requirements to do anything vary depending on whether one party controlled Albany or 2. So we had a commission. We had criteria that districts had to be compact, they had to be contiguous, they had to have equal population, They had to respect communities of interest, factors like that. One also of which was that no map could favor or disfavor a political party or candidate, basically a ban on partisan gerrymandering, the practice of drawing a map to favor one party over another. And the commission also had rules by which it was required to submit one set of Assembly, Senate, and congressional maps to the legislature. And if that set of maps was rejected, then the commission had to go back and create a second set of maps to send to the legislature. And if that set got rejected, then the legislature was free to draw maps on their own with some minor restrictions. So what happened is, and that gives you really the quick overview of what this commission was all about. The commission met beginning in 2021. Then Governor Cuomo delayed things by trying to control the budget and staff himself, and the legislative leaders said absolutely not. That took about 6 months of fighting. But once the commission got going, they ended up by the end of 2021, early 2022, unable to agree on a set of Assembly, Senate, and congressional maps. So in January 2022, the commission sent to the legislature two sets of maps, Set A and Set B. One was a Republican-drawn set of maps. The other was a Democratic-drawn set of maps. And the legislature proceeded to reject both sets of maps so that the commission was then tasked with going back to work and trying round two. That's where things broke down. The commission essentially imploded. They could not agree. There was a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blame being passed back and forth, but the commission stalled in its tracks. And at that point, using common sense and what they thought was precedent, the Assembly and the Senate proceeded to draw maps of their own and pass them. This is about February 3rd, 2022. And Governor Hochul signed the maps that day. And the very next day, a lawsuit was filed by Republican legislators and activists against the state Senate and congressional map in Steuben County, New York. Steuben County had 3 judges, only one of whom was sitting, a Republican elected surrogate court judge, Leroy McAllister. There's something called judge shopping or forum shopping. So the plaintiffs wanted to find a friendly forum. So they went to Steuben County, about a 9-hour drive from New York City, as I recall. It's a county south of Rochester. And after a trial and hearings, the judge decided 2 things. First, that because the commission failed to submit a second round of maps to the legislature itself could not act, couldn't do anything. But since they did do something, he also ruled that the Senate and Assembly maps were enacted improperly. He ruled that the Senate and the congressional maps were enacted improperly. And secondly, he ruled that the congressional map was a partisan gerrymander that was drawn specifically to favor Democrats over Republicans. I'll just mention, there's a lot of complication here, but the Assembly map was not challenged because of the 150 Assembly districts. The Democrats had about 103 districts, Republicans about 47, but the Republicans knew they weren't going to ever get a majority back again, that they lost the majority in 1974, and that reality dictated that there was no way they were going to pick up more seats to make a challenge against the Assembly map worth their effort. So the Assembly we're going to put aside for a moment. And then to make the litigation story short, by the time the lawsuits against the congressional and state Senate maps were litigated, a special master was appointed after the case went to the state Supreme Court, the trial court, then it went to the appellate division, and finally to the State Court of Appeals. And it ended up where the State Court of Appeals directed the Supreme Court judge in Steuben County to appoint what's known as a special master, an impartial outside redistricting expert to draw the maps. And by May of 2022, that's just what happened. That Jonathan Service, a political science professor at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, went up to Steuben County and he produced a map for the congressional districts. New York went from 27 to 26 congressional districts, and then also drew a map for the state Senate. And those maps were used in 2022. So if you're with me, we'll put that all behind us and then look at what happened next. Because the commission process imploded, Jim Walden, who recently dropped out of the mayor's race, as a lawyer, he brought a lawsuit arguing that the state assembly map needed to be redrawn because the process had stalled at the commission level. And that case got litigated, and the outcome of it was that the state court ordered the commission back to work with no excuses to develop an assembly map. And that's just what happened. By late 2023, a new map was agreed upon by the commission. And then the legislature rejected it, tweaked it a little bit, but 90% of what the commission did, the assembly adopted, and that new map was used in 2024. Then another case was brought, this time in Albany County, by Democratic congressional supporters. And they argued that the special master's map also was the result of an incomplete process for Congress. And the long story short there is that the courts also ordered the commission to go back to work and to produce a congressional map. So they did that. They finally agreed. The court basically said, stop the finger pointing and the blame, get back to work. We order you to develop a map for Congress. And the commission did their job. And then the legislature tweaked that map a little bit. Governor Hochul approved it. So we had a new map in 2024. The state Senate map that was drawn by the state court in 2022 did not get challenged. Reason probably being that the Democrats who lost at the lower court levels in 2022 actually picked up a supermajority in the state Senate, which is something that you can take to the bank. It was such a powerful message that they controlled a supermajority of the Senate on a court-drawn plan, which basically gave them a lot more power than they'd have just being a plurality. So the state Senate map that was drawn by the state court special master in 2022 is still with us. So that gives you the story of redistricting, a failed process, an amendment that was designed to fail, that did break down and resulted in a year of litigation, but it ended in 2024. And then the talk has been, well, let's amend the Constitution, let's fix it for 2030, because you draw lines once every 10 years after a census is taken. Let's fix what was broken. But then all of a sudden, Donald Trump calls Governor Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and said, I want 5 congressional districts. Now, keep in mind that the U.S. Constitution requires a census under Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution once every 10 years for the purpose of apportioning congressional districts among the states. And the Supreme Court has held that once a decade is more than enough. We also know that after Texas tried to redraw their lines for partisan purposes, no other reason out of the blue, 20 years ago, the Supreme Court said that unless the state law prohibits mid-decade redistricting, there's no federal problem in doing so. There's no federal impediment to redrawing the lines more than once a decade. Not ideal, but simply there's no prohibition against it. When congressional lines are drawn, when state legislative lines are drawn, you've got to follow some very basic rules. The first is the federal constitutional one person, one vote mandate that all districts have to be generally equal in population. The second requirement is that you do not violate the Federal Voting Rights Act, that where you have a situation where you have a large Black, Hispanic, or Asian population, and the voters there have been unable to elect their preferred candidate of choice, and that they could constitute a majority in a single member district. That's a situation called racially polarized voting, and you're required to create a district that would afford minority voters the opportunity to elect their preferred candidate of choice. So those are the two federal requirements. Everything else is up to the states. And Texas has no other rules. They have no limits, they have no criteria, they have no restraints. So as we've seen, it took a while because many of the Democrats left the state and just slowed things down. But Texas enacted a map earlier this month that paired or eliminated the opportunity for 5 Democrats to go back to Congress. When you have 2 different districts and you put the members in the same district, they're down to 1, you create a new district someplace else that could be more of a Republican district. And you do this by looking at census data that will tell you at literally the block level whether a district, whether a block, a community or neighborhood is more likely to vote blue or red. So you create more districts that provide more red opportunities. And while that was taking place, Democrats look to see, well, where can we do this? When the sky is falling, when all rules are set aside, when there's no logic or reason to do something beyond pure political greed, that you can't say we're going to stick to principles, we're going to stick to good government and fair, objective principles. The Democrats said they've got to fight back. So in California, Governor Gavin Newsom took the lead, and he did 2 things. He convinced the state legislature in Sacramento to, 1, propose a state constitutional amendment that would let the legislature draw a congressional map if any other state draws a congressional map mid-decade, and bypass California's independent state commission that usually draws the lines. Beginning in 2010 and continuing after 2020, California has its lines drawn by a completely independent commission that the legislature has no control over or relationship to. But they were able to get the legislature to put a ballot question on the November ballot this year to bypass that process and let the legislature draw a map. But not to waste time, the legislature went ahead and drew a map. And like Texas took out 5 Republicans, the Democrats in Texas, Texas took out 5 Democrats. In California, the Democrats paired or tried to eliminate 5 Republicans. Now, Texas is now a done deal. We'll know about California after Election Day. And continuing the story, Missouri has no rules beyond one person, one vote, and the Federal Voting Rights Act. So last night, the governor of Missouri signed a plan that would take Missouri's congressional district from what's now a 7 Republican, 2 Democrat delegation of 9 members and try to make it 8 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The president has also brought Indiana state legislators, Kansas state legislators in to try really one-on-one to pick off 1 district per state. Now, Democrats don't control as many states as Republicans do, and where Democrats do control, they tend to have more criteria, more of an objective, fair process than the red states do. So They're looking to redraw the lines now in places like Florida, Kansas, Indiana, just a few examples. And the Democrats are looking to see, well, they've really stretched thin opportunities to draw more districts in the states where Democrats do control the process. That would include Illinois, New Jersey, um, uh, in Maryland. In Maryland, the Democrats are very reticent to want to do something, but as of this morning, Governor Wes Moore is saying, well, he doesn't want to, but they're still thinking about it. In Illinois, Governor Pritzker is saying he doesn't want to do it, and there's very little that the Democrats can really do to gain a district in Illinois, but there's talk that's out there. Which brings us to New York. And in early August, when asked, Governor Hochul said that she wants to, fight fire with fire, and that New York should also get into the act and try to help the Democrats nationally. Because what this all gets down to is that if the Republicans have a 3 or 4 seat majority in the House of Representatives, every district counts. So Democrats just elected a new member to fulfill a vacancy in Arizona, and they're trying to delay seating the new member because they don't want her to be able to vote on things. So what do? You go after a district in Missouri, a district in Ohio, a district in Kansas, Indiana, one by one, trying to build up that that objective before you get to the starting gate majority of 2 or 3 districts, build it up to 5, 6, 7 districts. So we get to New York, and what can we do in New York? Governor Hochul said 2 things. One is that we should fight fire with fire and knock out some Republicans, and secondly, eliminate the state commission because it did its job poorly. We've tried it, and it's time to move on and away from that process. So where do we stand now with things in New York? The 2014 constitutional amendment included language that prohibits mid-decade districting. The Constitution basically says that after the set of lines is drawn beginning in 2022 and every 10 subsequent years afterwards, that a new map shall stay in place until the next decennial census is completed and the numbers are sent to the state. So that doesn't let New York do anything until 2031, which doesn't help the situation right now. So to address that, we have Senator Mike Gianaris from Queens and Assemblyman Michael Lasher in Manhattan introducing a constitutional amendment that would allow the state legislature, like in California, to bypass a commission and redraw the congressional map in New York. If any other state does so mid-decade, that New York can do that if need be. That amendment will be considered in Albany beginning in the new session in January. It has to pass the 2026 legislature and then also pass in the same wording by the legislature elected in 2026 so that the 2027 no, it has to be voted on 2026 and again in 2027 by the new legislature elected next November. If that happens, then the voters can approve the constitutional amendment in November 2027, and then New York can draw new lines in 2028. That's 3 years away. Other things are up in the air in New York as well. We have Speaker Carl Hastie saying that other parts of the amendment need to be fixed as well. He wasn't specific, but there are things that need addressing. Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins indicated she'd like to keep a commission, but that work needs to be done to fix things up before 2030. So that doesn't really provide New York the ability to do anything until 2028 at the earliest. The short of that, somebody can bring a lawsuit challenging the 2024 map, arguing something was violated somewhere in the Constitution. I've got ideas on what that might be, and then get the courts to throw the plan out and let the legislature go in and redraw. Now, it's almost October 1st, 2026. Petitioning next year starts in late February 2026. You have to have a congressional primary in the late spring in June of 2026 because of the Federal Overseas Voting Act. So if a lawsuit is brought tomorrow, the Constitution requires that a state Supreme Court judge decide the case within 2 months. So October 1st, November, December. We might get a decision by Thanksgiving. And then the decision gets appealed to the appellate division. Add 2 or 3 more weeks, maybe a month. And then you have another appeal to the State Court of Appeals, which takes us into January. So even if a challenge would be successful, then the legislature has to go back, let's say in January, February, and draw a new map, or the commission. This is all really, I'm just telling you hypothetically what could happen, but basically what I'm saying is that the clock is running and the clock has basically run out, that there's almost no time to bring a successful lawsuit this late in the year against the map to try to have something new in place. And even if that succeeded, what would you take out from the Republican side in New York? You've got Nicole Malliotakis, who already had a district that was rejected when they took Staten Island over the Verrazano Bridge into more blue areas of Brooklyn, and the court said you can't do that. You've got Michael Lawler in the Lower Hudson Valley. The Lower Hudson Valley between the Bronx and Albany has been a ping pong ball every 10 years because of population shifts in the state. But that's one district the Democrats can look at. You've got Cynthia Tenney in the central New York area. And then there are 2 Republicans out in Long Island. But anything that the Democrats try to do to eliminate a Republican still runs up against the state constitutional language that you cannot draw a map to favor or disfavor a political party or candidate. So even there, their hands are somewhat tied. And with any new map you draw, incumbent current members have to see their districts change as well. Now, I still argue with the special master from 2022, who happens to be a friend of mine, that the east side and the west side of Manhattan are not the same. He claims, well, we all have socioeconomic similarities. I'm telling him, as an East Side resident, we need a visa to go to the West Side. Just joking about it, but that's, I think, I don't have to tell any of you what I'm talking about. So there's always a chance that your current member of Congress would get dislodged again. And no incumbent wants to see that happen more than halfway into a decade. So the situation in New York is both politically difficult, legally maybe possible, but politically very much problematic. So so where things go, we have to really wait until next year when the legislature goes back in session and see where this all takes us. The legislature would have to act by May or June of next year so that an amendment could be placed on the ballot again in 2027 after a new legislature is elected. And be mindful that with whatever happens in this area, there will be a huge fight. People aren't going to sit on their hands on this. That if the Democrats try to change the Constitution, the Republicans are going to have many millions of dollars to fight it. But there's also a bright lining to all of this in that our own city council member, Julie Menon, has a bill in the City Council, Intro 1225, I believe, which would create a permanent New York City Census Outreach Office. And as you all may remember, Julie ran the city's very successful 2020 census effort. They put $40 million into a census outreach. New York's population gained by 600,000 people plus. That was an extraordinary effort. And what Julie is doing now is trying to get the city to make census outreach something much more permanent. And the census in 2030, not on the bright side, will likely include a citizenship question and God knows what else that the Trump administration might think of that will really harm New York to make it very difficult to count people in the census. But I testified on behalf of the Menon bill before the council about 2 weeks ago. She has 33 of 51 members sponsoring the bill, and it should pass this year. and hopefully not subject at all to any kind of a mayoral veto. So I've gone over 30 minutes. So thank you for hopefully keeping up with me and following what I've said. No quiz on this, but I think I've covered all the bases, and I'd be glad to answer any questions or discuss any points that any of you might have.
Jordan, can you unmute Sandrea, please? There we go.
Thank you, thank you. Great presentation, very informative, and just in such a time like this, very needed, the information. So we appreciate you and coming in and sharing this pertinent information for us. And I'm not gonna really ask a question. I'll wait and I'll go to the hands that are raised that have questions. And then I'll probably ask a question. But I need to get back there to the city law breakfasts that you all do, because I've been to quite a bit of them. So your series, just at your club.
Okay.
It's good. We'll jump to you, Lori.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor, thank you so much. This was an incredibly useful conversation. And I just have a question about, I've been doing a lot of ancestry.com, work, and the census is just an incredibly useful tool in that. And many of the people on the census, like my grandparents, are, not citizens. They came over from Italy, Sicily, and it's really, it's like a wonderful resource to have. And I'm just like, I'm not really sure what my question is, but it's like I'm concerned that if the Trump administration will not allow for a full counting of all the people who are here, that I think that will be just horrible, because it will not give us an accurate reflection of who is in our country.
Well,
And
you're
go ahead.
entirely accurate. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution, Article 14, Section 2, says quite clearly that the census, that the apportionment to the House of Representatives shall be based on the count of the whole number of persons. That when this amendment was debated after the Civil War, there were discussions, conversations, fights over whether the census should include everybody or just citizens. And for 200 years, it's been the precedent and the rule that you include everybody, every whole person in the census. Before the Civil War, Blacks were counted as 3/5 of a person, but they were counted. And that was eliminated in after the Civil War. And the process, the rules have been to count everybody. So any attempt by the Trump administration to ask a citizenship question will depress the count, because people aren't going to want to respond to the census. But what they're doing beyond that is then trying to find ways to take those citizenship numbers and non-citizenship numbers that they might develop and subtract that from the count, so as to deny states their proper number of congressional districts. As an attorney, as someone who's been practicing in this area for over 45 years, that is clearly unconstitutional, but none of us ever want to guess what the current Supreme Court might do.
Right.
So it's something we have to be very tenacious about. We have to really be mindful of it and understand it. So it's a very good question.
Thank you.
Miles. Thank you, Lori.
Hi, I'm gonna once more give my dues and say thank you. It was a very interesting and informative session. And the way that I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's sort of like a domino effect, how once one state start redrawing their lines, then the next one does it to counterbalance that, and it just goes on and on and on. And hopefully we're not at that point yet, but I was wondering if from your perspective, is there any point of really no return that we get to a point where each side just keeps trying to change it over and over again to try to gain their own political power? And is there any specific things that we should be watching out for in regard to that?
Well, it's hard to stop Trump from being Trump at this point. If he is telling somebody he wants something, and if he doesn't get it, he will take retribution against them. We haven't seen this before. Now, I've been around long enough to remember Richard Nixon as president, and we thought then that he might have been awful, but he was an attorney and he kind of knew, what the consequences of breaking the law could be. We're not facing that now, if I could be frank about it. And every day we find something unexpected is announced that we hadn't even thought of could happen. I mean, not taking Tylenol. I don't even get into all these things. I'm trying to be as objective as I can, but right now, when you have a House of Representatives Republican majority that could be um, maintained by eking out one congressional district from any state that might bend to Trump's will, that's going to happen. When will it end? Maybe once we have new leadership in Washington. But we're really going through totally, unprecedented, crazy times that we just haven't seen before. And I'm sorry to say this too, but we can't be much more explanatory or rational about it.
You're good, Miles? I know you muted yourself. You good? Okay, perfect. I turned my volume down a little bit because of the sirens. Sorry. All right, Wendy.
Wendy, did you get a
I
prompt to unmute?
I
Okay,
did.
perfect.
Thank you. My computer is sadly slightly slow. Thank you for just an amazing presentation, which I wish that everyone could watch this. And my question is for the rest of the United States. I mean, we have New York certainly has people who are progressive. In California, their leadership has really been bold and encouraging for progressives. But is there a more centralized leadership that can help in other states where the questionable redistricting can be challenged? Is there any
Well,
centralized?
to say centralized, the Democratic Party itself is often at times fighting itself, trying to find leadership. But I will give kudos to former Attorney General Eric Holder, who created with Barack Obama the National Democratic Redistricting Committee in 2016, 2017, to actively work on redistricting and voter protection and to fight partisan efforts to bollox up the redistricting process. They've been very successful to the extent they've been in raising money and litigating to fight a lot of these efforts. That's something that the Democratic Party for decades never really focused beyond the White House and the Congress. And they're realizing now, like the Republicans did, 20, 30 some odd years ago, that the real action is in the states and localities. So the Democrats have woke up to that. And the yeah, and AG Holders Committee is the one single organization that, in the 50 state approach is, really trying to guard the process and fight for the rule of law and democratic principles. Of course, there are groups like in Texas, in Missouri, you've got women voters, ACLU, Hispanic groups that are also litigating these. There are 4 lawsuits in Texas already filed challenging the new Texas congressional map. So there are people fighting in courts against this. Problem is that they tend to win at the trial and appeals court levels, but through something called the shadow docket, where the Supreme Court deals on emergency orders without having full hearings, that's where a problem develops that you just don't know what the Supreme Court will do, basically in secret, and in a 6-3 vote.
That's chilling. Is there something on the populace level that if we were to individually go out and advocate to our friends and families in southern New Jersey, which tends to skew Republican, or Missouri or Arkansas or Idaho or other places, are there educational efforts?
There are efforts. I can't document them all, but I know that they're going on. And there are phone bank efforts. As a New Yorker, I know that I've been asked to do phone banking in Pennsylvania to help in rural red-leaning places there. So a lot of that is going on. I am not directly involved in any partisan politics right now. So I've kept a distance from it being in academia, but I've worked as a Democratic attorney on redistricting for several decades and know what needs to happen.
Much appreciation. I will do research as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I have a census question. Some years ago, the NAACP was at some of the churches and they was telling people that if they have family members that are incarcerated, that they should still count them at their home when the census come around. Is that accurate information?
Well, legally, you are supposed to report to the census who lives in the house when the census is taken. So, legally, if there are 5 people in a house, let's say 2 parents and 3 children, and there's a sixth resident who happens to be incarcerated, you are not supposed to list that person at your residence. However, I'll take credit for this. In 2009, the state legislature passed a bill. I helped write it because I was counsel to the Senate Democrats that reallocates or reassigns every New York State incarcerated person with a known address outside of the prison back to that home of residence prior to incarceration for the purposes of redistricting, drawing the district lines. And by that process, when I worked on it in 2010, 11, 12, over 30,000 incarcerated persons were put back into their residences. But Brooklyn picked up the most people. So the problem, so all of you understand, is that if you are in a prison in a rural area, let's just say there are 500 people in the prison, those 500 people are added to the local count to help draw a district to which those people have no relationship to. And it doesn't affect funding levels for programs, only for districting and representation. And that's a process that's worked fairly well in New York after 2010 and after 2020.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you for writing that bill up.
Yeah.
Anything from you, Sarah? Any questions? I know it's staring something. This was good.
By the way, I don't know if it was mentioned, we posted in the chat a primer I wrote 5 years ago on how the state process it was supposed to work. This was before it actually happened, but it basically takes the current state constitutional process and lays it out for you. Also, I'll mention that I publish a weekly newsletter on New York State election law issues. I don't follow campaigns, but on election law, census, redistricting, voting rights. I don't know if I can put it in the chat, but if you send me an email, I'll just spell it out for you. It's if you're ready, pen and paper, JEFFREY WICE@nyls.edu. Again, that's JEFFREY.WICE@nyls.edu. Just ask to be put on my newsletter, mention that you're with CB8, and we send this out on Mondays.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Anything from you, Sarah?
Um, I I was I didn't know the piece about how the census how the law requires that or permits the census to count all people and not simply
Everybody's counted regardless of status, regardless of citizenship.
and so that seems like it is it's a area that could be tampered with or a pressure point that can be that could depress the count in metropolitan areas or areas
You're
that
right
have
on,
more
you're right on
diversity.
target. That is a big fear. In 2019, Donald Trump tried to add a citizenship question. The Supreme Court knocked it out because not that it was unconstitutional, it's not unconstitutional. They didn't add the question properly. They didn't follow the right rules to the Federal Administrative Practices and Procedures Act on how to add a question. It takes about 2 years to vet a question, to do focus groups, analysis, research. You just don't add it overnight.
Mhm.
But they have that opportunity now, and given everything else they've done on data collection and God knows what else, between the lines, they can get a lot done without us knowing about it in advance. They're required to submit the questions to Congress 2 years in advance. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
3 years in advance. So they have time to prepare until 2027. That gives them 2 years to work on this. And they are doing, it was all laid out in the Project 2025 report. It's all in there.
Wow. So this next congressional election really is important for so many reasons.
Well, the turnout will be important to see in states like, will these so supposedly redrawn red districts actually elect Republicans? Donald Trump won with a lot of Hispanic support when he campaigned to say he would only deport criminals, non-citizen criminals. He's deporting everybody. If you look, it's different. You're going to be picked up on the street. I read today in the paper that an ICE agent said if you're not male, blonde hair, blonde haired, blue eyed, 40-year-old, American looking, you're suspect, and that's scary.
Yeah.
I have a niece-in-law. She's from Singapore. She has a doctorate from Harvard. She has a green card. She's married to my nephew who's born here, but she's afraid to travel anywhere.
Right, right. Wow.
I have
Um,
I'm sorry, Sarah. I have a neighbor that I grew up with, and their family's from Honduras, but he was born here, and he was stopped coming back into New York at the airport, and they detained him for about 12 to 13 hours. They didn't grab his wife, but they grabbed him. And I mean, that's like horrible. And he was born here. So, I mean, it's getting rough and tough. Go ahead, Sarah. Just want to-
oh, I was wondering in the states that are taking these kind of legislative shortcuts to redistrict, um, how long can can lawsuits delay the implementation of a new map?
That depends a lot on the rules and the judge, the lawyers, the tactics. I know from my experience in New York that if the Democrats did what they um, want to do, the Republicans would just drag this out in court and file motions and stall things. And right now, there's been an attack on the New York State Voting Rights Act, where the New York law enacted in 2022 allows voters to challenge at-large town boards. We've seen lawsuits in Westchester, Orange, and Erie counties. and the lawsuits were filed over 2 years ago. The first case won't even be heard by the State Court of Appeals until next month. So they take about 2 years to work their way to the courts, and most of the action has been to delay, delay, and delay.
Any other questions, anyone else?
Well, if not, well, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Professor.
And I
This was
think I've added myself to your mailing list, so I'll keep track of your work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was great.
Okay,
We appreciate you.
I will sign off. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Goodbye.
Have a great night.
All right, you all. So old business, any old business? Any new business? Motion to adjourn?
I think we got a thumbs up from Miles. Do we have
Okay.
a second? A second from Lori?
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
attending the meeting. Thank you, David, for attending.